It all began on a hot summer morning in Alaska, far from the dusty streets of Amman where I was raised. I had never thought I would leave my family or my little world, but life had a way of taking us by surprise. The Martina family, who had previously seemed to be the ideal family, needed a nanny and I needed the money. It wasn't just about the paycheck, though. It was also about proving to my parents and siblings that I could succeed in a place so different from my own. Being 33, single, and fiercely independent was unusual for a Jordanian woman. Then there was Ethan Martin, the husband. He was tall and had an easy charm that instantly put you at ease. His sandy brown hair curled slightly at the ends, and his laugh lines hinted at a man who had seen joy, not just stress. He didn't say much that day, just nodded politely and handed me a cup of tea. Emily Martin, the wife, was elegant and beautiful, wearing tailored blouses and designer heels that clicked against the marble floors of their large home. Her blonde hair was swept into a bun, and she spoke with a warm smile that made every word count. Their children, Anne and Liam, were energetic and full of questions at the age of 5 and 3. Naturally, I was anxious because I had never worked as a nanny before, but Emily reassured me that my background as the oldest of 6 siblings would be enough. She was kind, but I could tell she was a stickler for detail because she gave me a thick bin of rules, meal plans, daily routines, emergency numbers, and even instructions on how to fold laundry. The first few weeks went smoothly. I would get up at 6 in the morning, make breakfast, pack Anne's school lunch, and keep Liam occupied until naps. My days were spent reading storybooks, finger painting, and chasing Liam around the backyard at night. I'd retreat to my small room in the basement, exhausted but content. It wasn't until one afternoon, about a month into the job, that I noticed Ethan watching me. I was sitting on the kitchen floor wiping up a spill Liam had made with his juice box when I felt his eyes on me. "You're amazing with them," he said, leaning against the counter. I looked up, startled. "Oh, thank you, sir. Please call me Ethan," he said, smiling. I nodded, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. It wasn't what he said, but the way he said it, like he genuinely meant it. From that day, I began noticing him more. How he always asked if I'd had lunch, how he offered to help carry the groceries, and how he lingered in the kitchen when I cooked. Emily, on the other hand, was often absent, busy with her high-powered corporate job. "Don't you ever get tired?" Ethan asked one evening as I was setting the dining table. "Tired of what? Of doing everything for everyone?" I shrugged. "It's my job. I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be," he said, his voice soft. His words lingered with me long after he left the room. It was strange being seen like that in my culture. Women were expected to give endlessly, to serve without question, but Ethan's words made me feel appreciated. I tried to ignore it. Of course, I reminded myself of who I was and what I believed in. I was a Muslim woman bound by faith and tradition. There were lines I could never cross, no matter how kind or handsome my employer was. But life, as I would soon learn, had other plans. That summer stretched endlessly, the day long and hot. Emily's work trips grew more frequent, leaving Ethan and me alone with the children. Slowly, the boundaries began to blur. At first, it was innocent shared jokes, stolen glances, and casual conversations that lasted a little too long. But deep down, I knew I was treading dangerous waters. One rainy evening, things shifted. The children were asleep, the house quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when Ethan walked in. "Need some help?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. "No, it's okay, I'm almost done," I replied. But he stayed anyway. We worked in silence for a while, the air heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you ever miss home?" he asked every day. I admitted, "But I came here for a reason. You've sacrificed so much," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. I looked at him, surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because I see it the way you put everyone else first, the way you never complain. It's rare." His words caught me off guard. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Not even back home. I felt a strange mix of gratitude and guilt, as though I was betraying something sacred just by listening. "It's nothing special," I said, brushing off the compliment. "It is to me," he replied, his gaze locking with mine, and in that moment, Something shifted between us. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But it was our connection. A spark, a silent acknowledgement of something neither of us did to name. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Ethan and I became more reckless, consumed by the fire we'd ignited. Each moment alone with him felt like a stolen treasure, a secret I both cherished and feared, yet the more time we spent together, the heavier the guilt grew. Emily returned from her conference the following Monday, her presence in the house, a stark reminder of the life Ethan and I were dismantling piece by piece. One evening after Emily had gone to bed, I sat on the porch steps, staring out at the darkened sky. The air was crisp, the stars scattered like tiny shards of glass. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my shoulders, trying to block out the chill and the thoughts swirling in my mind. Ethan joined me moments later, his footsteps stepped soft against the wooden floor. He sat down beside me close enough that our shoulders brushed. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice low. "I've been thinking," I replied, not looking at him about us. I nodded, my throat tightening. "Ethan, we can't keep doing this," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know it's complicated. It's not just complicated," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "It's wrong. You have a wife, a family, and I've lost myself in this. I don't even recognize who I am anymore." He reached for my hand, his touch gentle. "You're still you, Aaliyah. You're the woman who loves my kids like they're her own, the woman who's brought life back into this house. Don't let this ruin everything." I pulled my hand away, tears stinging my eyes. "But it has, Ethan, don't you see? We've ruined everything." For the first time, his composure cracked. "I love you, Aaliyah," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't lose you." His words cut through me like a knife. I loved him too. There was no denying that anymore, but love wasn't enough to erase the damage we'd done the following week. I made a decision. I knew I couldn't stay. Not like this. The weight of what we'd done was too much to bear, and I couldn't continue living in a house built on lies. I began searching for a new job in secret, reaching out to agencies and families in need of a nanny. It wasn't easy. I'd grown attached to Anne and Liam, and the thought of leaving them broke my heart. But I knew it was the only way to save myself. The day I left was bittersweet. Anne and Liam clung to me, their tearful goodbyes breaking my heart. Emily hugged me tightly, thanking me for everything I'd done for their family. And Ethan stood silently by the door, his hands clenched into fists at his sides as I loaded my suitcase into the taxi. I felt a strange sense of relief. The house that had been both my refuge and my prison faded into the distance as the car pulled away. I watched the Martins' house disappear in the rearview mirror, my heart a tumult of emotions. The children's tearful goodbyes echoed in my mind, and Emily's hug lingered on my skin, her warmth contrasting sharply with the weight of the secret I carried. But it was Ethan's silence at the door that stayed with me. The Moses expression was a mix of sorrow and resignation. He hadn't said a word as I left, but his eyes spoke volumes, full of emotions. I wished I could forget I spent the ride in silence, staring out at the unfamiliar streets, my hands clutching my scarf for the first time in months. I felt like I could breathe, even if the air was heavy with guilt and loss. I told myself I had done the right thing, even though every part of me ached. I had walked away not just from the Martins, but from a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. Life had moved forward as it always does. I was back in a man running a small community center that offered classes and jobs for women. It was something I had dreamed of for years, a place where women could find independence, just as I had. The work was challenging but fulfilling. And in this space, I began to piece myself back together one afternoon as I was organizing a shipment of handmade goods for a local fair. A voice called my name, Aaliyah. I turned and froze. It was Emily. She stood in the doorway of the center, dressed simply in loose linen pants and a plain blouse. Her hair had streaks of gray now, and her face was softer, less polished than I remembered. For a moment, I couldn't move. Memories of that summer came rushing back. Sharp and vivid. Emily. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" She smiled faintly, stepping inside. I was in Jordan for a conference. Someone mentioned this center and I had to see it for myself. I didn't know it was yours. Her gaze swept over the room, taking in the colorful scarves and pottery lining the shelves. It's beautiful, thank you, I said cautiously. My heart pounded as questions swirled in my mind. Did she know? Why was she here? How are Anne and Liam? I asked, my voice steady despite my nerves. They're good, she said, smiling. Anne's in 3rd grade now and Liam just started soccer. They still talk about you. You know, they miss you. My chest tightened. I miss them too. I admitted. We stood in silence for a moment before she spoke again. I didn't come here just by chance. Aaliyah. Her voice was softer now, almost hesitant. I've had a lot of time to think about that summer, about you. About Ethan. My bread death caught. She knew I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. You don't need to explain, she said. I think I knew even then. I saw the way he looked at you. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But deep down her voice trailed off and she sighed. I'm not here to blame you or him. I just needed to see you to understand. Her words left me stunned. Emily, I'm so sorry, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I never intended to do you or your family any harm. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. I said I was lost and I allowed myself to believe in something that wasn't mine. Emily nodded, her expression unreadable. I know, she said, her own eyes were glistening, and perhaps that's why I don't hate you. It's strange to feel betrayed, but also thankful that you gave my kids more love than I could ever give while I was too busy pursuing a career. She whispered softly, I've forgiven Ethan, and I've forgiven you too. Life is messy. Allah, yet we have the option of letting it go or carrying the mess. Her words hung in the air like a fragile thread, tying us together in a way I never expected. As Emily turned to leave, she stopped at the door and said, You're doing good work here. Her smile was warm and she said, Don't let the past define you, Aaliyah. You're more than that. I stood there for a while, the sound of the busy center fading into the background. Emily's visit was unexpected, but it felt like the last chapter of a story I had worked so hard to leave behind. As I went back to my work, I realized something. I wasn't just living in the past any longer. I was finally moving forward.